A military transport plane crashes in Algeria shortly after takeoff, killing over 250 people. Global hunger is rising. Can artificial intelligence help? And social housing built by 3D printers. It's being hailed as a major step forward in green construction. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight with the tragic crash on Wednesday of an Algerian military transport plane. Algerian State TV reports that at least 257 people were killed. State television broadcasting from the scene showed crowds gathering around the smoking and flaming wreckage near the Bafarik Air Base, where officials say the plane went down shortly after taking off. The Algerian Defense Ministry says the plane was scheduled to fly to Tindouf in southwestern Algeria. According to Reuters news agency, Algeria's ruling FLN party says the dead includes 25 members of Polisario, an Algerian-backed group fighting for the independence of neighboring Western Sahara, a territory also claimed by Morocco in a long-running dispute. At this time, the cause of the crash is not immediately clear, and the Defense Ministry says an investigation has been opened. In East Africa, human error is being blamed for a bus plunging into a river in Kenya, killing at least 17 people and wounding dozens more. An Narok County commissioner says Tuesday's accident occurred after a person who was controlling traffic near the bridge the bus was traveling on sent a wrong signal. A local official says 40 others were rushed to the hospital after their driver lost control while trying to avoid a head-on collision with an oncoming vehicle. The accident happened while the bus was traveling from western Homa Bay County to Nairobi. Now, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, the South African icon who fought tirelessly, visibly, and at great personal cost to bring racial equality to South Africa, is being celebrated in death with vows that her struggle will continue. Wednesday's somber memorial in Johannesburg is the culmination of at least a dozen memorials held across the nation since she died on April the 2nd. Madikizela Mandela, a lifelong activist who served in parliament for nearly 2 decades, was the second wife of Nelson Mandela, the man seen as the leader of the apartheid struggle and who later went on to become South Africa's first black president. President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was set to deliver the eulogy at her state funeral on Saturday, vowed to continue her legacy during a memorial in a rural hometown. Now, the death of Madikizela Mandela revived memories of South Africa's long struggle to end apartheid and achieve equality among the different races in the Rainbow Nation. Tributes from top South Africans at our memorial service Wednesday have shown her to be a complicated and controversial figure, but one whose struggle, they say, remains important in this still divided nation. For more insight on Winnie Mandela, VOA's Anita Powell joins me live via Skype from Johannesburg. Now, Anita, welcome. And first, she remains controversial even in her death. What really makes Winnie that controversial?
There are more than a few things that make Winnie Madikizela Mandela a controversial figure, but perhaps the one that stands out most is the 1989 death of a 14-year-old activist named Stompie Moeketsi. She is accused, and many South Africans believe that she was responsible for his violent death. And she was actually convicted of kidnapping and causing bodily harm, but not of his murder. But that's a very ugly period in South African history, and she's widely blamed by quite a few South Africans for being responsible for his death.
Now, today's event was obviously very big, very important to the people, especially of Soweto. But what next after today?
So we're going now into 3 days of mourning ahead of her official state funeral, which is going to be Saturday in Pretoria, and it's going to be with full state and military honors. And the president will deliver her eulogy, and then she'll be laid to rest in Johannesburg.
And Anita, we know that, perhaps just briefly we can mention some people may assume that perhaps the controversy was just about those who supported apartheid and those who opposed apartheid. What is the reality?
The reality is the Soweto newspaper, which represents the township of Soweto, which is predominantly black, described her once in a headline as the mugger of the nation. The reality is she clashed with President Zuma, Mandela, Mbeki, and with Desmond Tutu, who she once called a cretin. So she had enemies in many different parts of the struggle. So I think that would be unfair to say that it was just pro-apartheid people who didn't support her.
Now that you've said all that, her family apparently is not very, very happy about all that is being said about Winnie Mandela. Why?
Some of her family members got up at her memorial today in Soweto and said that they just thought it was disrespectful that people were criticizing her, especially over this death of Stompie Moeketsi, I believe, because, as I said, she was never convicted of murder. Her bodyguard was convicted of murder. And so these old allegations, these old prejudices, they say, are tarnishing her legacy. And they said that South Africans who say these things are acting like ungrateful children, and they chastised them for doing so.
And on the other side, has this also generated the conversation over what apartheid did to her, how this might have actually transformed her to the woman she became too?
Well, let me just tell you about one particularly harrowing episode in the life of Winnie Mandela. She was kept in solitary confinement for 18 months. And critically, during that time, she asked repeatedly for information on her two daughters about their well-being, and she was denied any information whatsoever. So I just want you to imagine that, solitary confinement for 18 months in a condemned cell, I should add, completely naked. And she was tortured psychologically, so she says. She was interrogated over and over again. What effect would that have on anybody? It's mind-blowing.
Now, as much as you can try to remember or kind of as you look around the landscape, is there any woman in South Africa who stands at the level of Winnie Mandela from throughout the time of this struggle until today?
Well, there are several. There are more than a few. And I think South Africa right now is realizing that we need to remember the women icons. They would include Albertina Sisulu. They would include Adelaide Tambo. These were the wives of Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu, but they played a huge role in the struggle. These include women like Amani, Amali Kachalia, and also Sophie de Bruyn, who were participants in the women's marches of 1956. So yes, no, there are many women who participated in the struggle, and women have always played a huge role in the South African struggle, and I think a lot of South Africans recognize that.
Anita, thank you very much for your reporting and putting things in perspective. That's VOA's Anita Powell reporting live via Skype from Johannesburg. Now, the International Committee of the Red Cross warns that the 4-year civil war in South Sudan continues to claim innocent lives, displace civilians, and destroy property. Tens of thousands are estimated to have died in the conflict, which has also displaced 25% of the country's population of 12 million. The United Nations says ethnic cleansing is taking place and warns of genocide amid reports of murder, rape, and the torture of civilians. The economy, almost entirely dependent on oil exports, is in tatters as output has been cut. Over 5 million people in the country are estimated to be facing life-threatening levels of hunger, according to the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. This year, the Red Cross has evacuated 180 people with war-related injuries.
There was a big fight pretty far from here, so all the patients have to be flown in to here. They arrived in a hospital there, and we could go there, select the worst case patients to come here first. What you see a lot is the bullet wounds, big injuries, mostly in the legs. So most of the wounds, before they get treated, they were already infected. They're getting dirty, so we have to do a lot of debridement to clean the wounds, heal the fractures.
Well, attacks have also been directed at humanitarian workers, complicating delivery of relief services on which hundreds of thousands of the displaced depend. The U.S. State Department says it's closely following developments in Khartoum after Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir ordered the immediate release of all political prisoners in the country. Al-Bashir's order to release prisoners was reported by the state news agency SUNA, but a State Department official told VOA as of Tuesday afternoon There were no confirmations of released political prisoners. Al-Bashir's order is reported to be part of an effort to promote reconciliation and peace weeks after mass arrests were made to suppress anti-government protests. The North African country is grappling with a currency crisis and very high rates of inflation that have fueled unrest. Now, London's V&A Museum has put Ethiopian treasures plundered by British forces on display, and it's in talks with the African country to give them back. But a loan is the most likely option, which may not be enough for campaigners. Lucy Fielder has more.
These treasures plundered by British troops could soon be returned to Ethiopia. London's Victoria and Albert Museum has put them on display to mark the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Magdala, when British expeditionary troops ransacked the Emperor's fortress. It took 200 mules and 15 camels to carry their loot of sacred manuscripts and royal gold. Emperor Tewodros II killed himself. Now the V&A, one of several museums that holds Magdala artefacts, is in talks with Ethiopia about their future. A long-term loan is one option on the table.
But as we look to the future, I think what we're interested in are partnerships around conservation, interpretation, heritage management, and these need to be supported by government assistance so that institutions like the V&A can support sister institutions in Ethiopia.
That's welcome, says Ethiopia's ambassador, but why not just give them back?
I don't think Ethiopians will settle for a loan. The exhibition is very important in the sense that people will know they're here and that they've not been on display. But I don't think that will be the end of campaigns.
Another former seat of empire, France, sparked a debate in March. President Emmanuel Macron said African heritage shouldn't be held prisoner in European museums and appointed 2 experts to explore repatriation. Hunt said that approach assumed guilt and that the V&A would examine claims case by case. And there's little change concerning London's other contested objects, such as the Elgin marbles from the Athens Parthenon, which are housed in the British Museum.
Now, the Africa 54 team is always thrilled when you reach out to us on social media and let us know what you think about us and the stories we cover. We recently asked on our social media channels, what are the challenges girls face in Africa? And we received a lot of comments. Obenike Okeke from Nigeria reached out to me on Twitter to say, the tradition of putting women behind the scene has to be totally deleted. This will enable a reorientation from the grassroots. For our coverage of conflicts around the world, Mary Amos, also from Nigeria, said, NATO is not doing enough. There is no need to deceive ourselves. The world is not at peace. The world is certainly not at peace. And we're trying very hard to bring you reports from areas of conflict. Now, we're very happy when we get messages like this one from Peter Karenge Nganga from Kenya, who says, you guys have been doing an awesome job covering Africa, which is especially important at this time. Now, I want to thank you very much for your comments and keep them coming. Reach out to us on Facebook at VOA Africa 54. And don't forget, we stream our show live every day. Follow me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now coming up, what's keeping technology from helping to feed the developing world? Stay with us.
News and notes. This is Living Better.
Autoimmune disease means Anthony LaRocca has to take many pills a day, and he's waiting for a kidney transplant. Now, scientists in his native Australia say they are a step closer to growing kidneys in the laboratory, successfully transplanting a mini kidney from stem cells into a mouse.
In this paper, we've actually shown that you can transplant that into an animal and have the animal actually provide a blood supply to the tissue. And with that blood supply, the kidney actually matures and starts to function.
The work is underway at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute.
The hope is that we'd be able to take a human stem cell and build tissue that then is transplanted into a patient in a similar way, I guess, to transplanting a whole organ, and that we hope will give you a much better quality of life than dialysis.
Professor Melissa Little in Melbourne. Clinical trials of the technique, though, are still years away. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
Well, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is back on Capitol Hill Wednesday, answering more difficult questions from U.S. lawmakers. Zuckerberg testified before lawmakers for the first time Tuesday, answering their concerns about the social media giant's failure to protect the private information of as many as 87 million users worldwide. His VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson.
Outside Congress, a call to fix Facebook.
You can't sell my privacy! Zuckerberg, that's absurd!
Inside, a response from the man who founded it.
And that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake. And I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here.
A mistake that allowed political firm Cambridge Analytica to access data through third-party apps, exposing the personal information of millions of Facebook users worldwide. And the consequences are considerable.
It's serious for Facebook along multiple dimensions. To be sure, their stock price took a hit. People have growing concern about the future of the company, but I think also whether Facebook can continue to operate as it does is now an open question. I think in Washington and elsewhere, you'll be seeing push for real change.
Change started in a highly unusual hearing with nearly half of the U.S. Senate.
Would you be comfortable sharing with us the name of the hotel you stayed in last night?
No.
If you've messaged anybody this week, would you share with us the names of the people you've messaged?
Senator, no, I would probably not choose to do that publicly here.
I think that may be what this is all about. Your right to privacy.
But Zuckerberg promised change.
If we find that someone improperly used data, we're going to ban them from Facebook and tell everyone affected.
Improving transparency with social media users should be the next step, some senators said.
The average American has no idea what they're getting in for. Did you say those terms and conditions? I'm a lawyer. I couldn't even understand the first paragraph.
And while some senators recognized Facebook's need for a business model that monetizes personal information with targeted advertising,
nothing in life is free. Everything involves trade-offs. If you want something without having to pay money for it.
Zuckerberg's Hill testimony has already revived talk of passing laws disclosing advertisers and protecting privacy.
Would you support a rule that would require you to notify your users of a breach within 72 hours?
Senator, that makes sense to me.
A discussion set to continue as Zuckerberg faces a second round of questions before a House panel Wednesday. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
Well, despite a global abundance of food, a United Nations report says 815 million people, 11% of the world's population, went hungry in 2016. Advances in technology and artificial intelligence can help feed them. But there are challenges that keep first world technologies from reaching the developing world. VOA's Elizabeth Lee explains.
Hunger affects 1 in 9 people globally, and that number is rising. Poverty is not the only reason why.
Increasingly, we're also seeing hunger caused by the displacement related to conflict, natural disaster as well.
Humanitarian organizations are turning to new technologies such as AI or artificial intelligence to fight global food insecurity.
What AI offers us right now is an ability to augment human capacity. So we're not talking about replacing human beings and things, but we're talking about doing things, doing more things and doing them better than we could by just human capacity alone.
Artificial intelligence can analyze large amounts of data to assist farmers in developing countries and locate areas impacted by conflict and natural disasters. The data can then be accessed by farmers from their smartphones.
When you take geospatial data and soil mapping data and use AI to do the analytics, it can send me the information. So in a nutshell, it can help me when to plant, what to plant, how to plant.
When you start combining technologies, AI, robotics, sensors, that's when we see magic start to happen. On farms for production, to increase crop yields.
But the developing world is often the last to get new technologies.
815 million people are hungry, and I can bet you that nearly 814 million out of the 815 million do not have smartphone.
And even when the technology is available, other barriers still exist.
A lot of these people that we talked about that are hungry, they don't speak English. So when we get the insights out of this technology, how are we going to pass it on to them?
While it may take time for new technologies to reach the developing world, many hope such advances will ultimately trickle down to farmers in regions that face food insecurity.
You've invented the technology, the big investment's gone in. Now you're modifying it, which brings the cost down as well. So I think 3 to 4 years maybe, we'll even have some of the things we have here being used there as well.
Those working in humanitarian organizations say entrepreneurs must look outside their own countries to adapt the new technologies to combat global hunger. And farmers will need to be trained so they can harness the power of artificial intelligence to help feed the hungry in the developing world. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Is this the future? 3D printed public housing in France. We'll be right back.
In Algeria, nearly 300 people were killed in a military plane crash near Alger. In the Central African Republic, after days of violent tensions between the militia and the UN peacekeepers in PK5, demonstrators lay corpses in front of the UN mission. In South Sudan, the International Committee of the Red Cross warns against attacks aimed at civilians in the conflict involving the opposing forces of sitting President Salva Kiir and of former Vice President Riek Machar. The Standard Bank in Ivory Coast plans to partner with its biggest shareholder, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, to capitalize on a Chinese investment drive into the country. Finally, in Ethiopia, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London is open to talks concerning the Magdala artifacts being returned to Ethiopia.
Welcome back to Africa 54. And here's what's trending. A house built by a 3D robot printer is now open to the public in Western France. Backers are hailing it as a step forward in green construction. The robot printer uses a special polymer material for the two outside layers of the building's walls, which reduces waste, and when combined with the concrete inner layer, makes for extremely efficient installation and lifting its green credentials. The 5-room house will be allocated a family according to the usual criteria of social housing, with the first tenants expected in June. Future projects include 80 homes in Mauritius. Next up, patients or those conducting regular health checkups will soon be able to get their medical reports in a few minutes, thanks to new technology developed by a Dubai-based tech firm. Bodio is working with Dubai authorities on installing artificial intelligence-operated health pods that allow customers to complete full-body scans autonomously. The new technology aims to facilitate the process of conducting health checkups by making it accessible for customers in shopping malls, pharmacies, gyms, or even at supermarkets. The pod's software walks them through a consecutive set of motions and tests that last between 8 to 10 minutes before displaying the results and emailing them a copy, all for free. And finally, good news for Star Wars fans. A new trailer has been released for the latest spin-off, Solo, a Star Wars story, a film that takes audiences back to the youth of smuggler, ace pilot and charming scoundrel Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford, in the original 1977 Star Wars movie. The movie will have its world premiere at the Cannes Film Festival in May. And that's what's trending today. Now, across the globe, the selfie has become a social media phenomenon. While it's considered bad manners in some places, there is a venue in Los Angeles where it is welcomed at all times. Jania Dillard has more.
We like to think that the selfie is an invention of the 21st century, but it's not. Founders of the newly opened Selfie Museum in Los Angeles set out to prove that people's desire to have pictures of themselves goes back hundreds of years. Roman Emperor, the Mona Lisa, self-portraits by Dürer and Rembrandt, the black and white photos that adorn our grandparents' bedside tables, all point to the long historic tradition of the selfie.
I think the realization that selfies are not new. People like to say they're new. Paris Hilton likes to claim she invented them. And while she may have made them more famous, they're definitely not new. People have been obsessed with self-imagery and taking their pictures or drawing themselves since people began drawing on cave walls. People have been drawing human figures. Only thing that's changed in that entire time is the technique and the technology.
Today, you don't have to waste hours sitting for a portrait. The camera on your smartphone will get you a good quality picture in a split second. Didn't like it? Simply try again.
I see pictures as capturing memories, and selfies are very convenient because you can see how the picture is going to look while it's being taken.
And it's also very fun to see you take 70 pictures of yourself to pick that perfect one, because I know we all do it. I definitely do it. And when I find that perfect one, it always makes me really happy.
According to Instagram statistics, one of the most popular selfie spots is the gym. There are more than 2 million pictures that have a hashtag gym selfie. Equally popular is taking a selfie in a car or in a bathroom, which has been used as a selfie background more than 1.3 million times. This surprised the exhibition curators so much that they decided to have a special installation in the museum, a bathroom with no mirrors. They hope that makes visitors think about how far the selfie obsession can take a person. But apart from that, museum founders have gone out of their way to provide all sorts of breathtaking selfie backgrounds. Among them, the top floor of the tallest building in the world, Dubai's Burj Khalifa, and the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones. It doesn't really matter that neither of these is real. What matters is that such a selfie will no doubt get its owner likes galore. Jania Dillard for VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well. And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.